Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's Novak Djokovic versus Carlos Alcaraz at the Australian Open 2025 quarterfinal post-match analysis. I cannot wait to get into this one. I watched this match from start to finish during the commentary for the channel, and I've got a lot of thoughts on how this match played out and some insights into the match and what we can potentially take from it going forward. Before we do get into it, though, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Okay, we're going to get into this then. So I'm going to go through the match and point out a few of the key areas. We're also going to break down tactically how it all played out. And I have quite a few thoughts, if I'm being honest, quite a few thoughts on it. So I'm going to first of all go through the match and give you guys some insights into what I thought of it. We'll also look at the stats, of course, as always, and see how that potentially had a bearing on the match. So to start off with, Alcaraz in both the first two sets, he was down straight away a break in the first and second sets. Now, the first set, he started off very error prone. There were a lot of plus one forehand errors, especially. And to be fair, that was a theme that carried on throughout the match, but it did diminish as the match went on. It wasn't as prevalent, but especially at the start of the match, it was pretty shocking, in honesty, to see because you just don't really expect that from Alcaraz. And there was the game that he got broken was pretty much completely down to errors from him. It wasn't really Djokovic pressing him lots. He was making his returns as he always does, the best returner to ever grace the tennis court. And we'll talk more about his returning later because that was a big factor in the result of this match. But at the start, it was Alcaraz who just came out very slow, and Djokovic was solid, wasn't playing exceptional at that point, and he did enough to just get in front. He was utilizing the serve out wide really well, Djokovic, and this again was another common theme throughout this whole match, but especially at the start in the first set, Djokovic found a lot of success with that slice serve out wide from the Jew side, and I mean his success rate was very high. Alcaraz was not handling it well. He was missing a lot of forehands, either not making it into court at all, or into the tram lines, or wide, or long, or into the net. He just was struggling to read it, which was very strange because serve placement was predominantly out wide on that juice side. So it's almost like Alcaraz didn't make the adjustments or wasn't willing to at that point, that early maybe in the match or set. So that was an interesting thing to see. Eventually, though, as we kind of approach the middle of that set, Djokovic tweaks his groin, I think it was. It's not confirmed because he didn't give much information post match because he didn't want to. And he tends to be quite coy about injuries during tournaments. So he looked like he tweaked it, and he ended up getting a medical timeout after Alcaraz broke back, and then he broke again to go 5-4 up. Now, how did Alcaraz get to that point? Because obviously, from 2-love down to 5-4, serving for the set. Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, I think Djokovic didn't really raise his level or drop his level at this point. He was, for me anyway, I think there might be a very minute dip in form. I think just after the tweak happened, where he wasn't moving quite as well as he normally did, or was even. So there was a few moments and few points where he looked a little bit off balance, and that definitely had an effect, no doubt. He wasn't chasing down the balls like he normally would, and I think Alcaraz then took over with his physicality in the rallies. Made a big difference, of course, and he managed to then get in front, as you'd expect when you're playing a hampered Djokovic, where he's not as efficient with his movement, and he's a little bit off balance. Because I would say one of Djokovic's biggest assets is his balance. I'd say he's the most balanced player on tour. And you might say that's such a strange thing to say, but balance is so key in tennis. I think any coach will tell you that. So Alcaraz gets in front. It's all good. 5-4. Medical timeout for Djokovic. Gets his treatment. Comes back. Alcaraz manages to close it out. Closes it out pretty comfortably in the end. Fantastic. Great. 1-love up in sets. And he goes into the second set and you're thinking, okay, well, Djokovic is in trouble here because he's looking hampered physically. Alcaraz is now starting to grow into this match. Surely this is could potentially be 3 or 4 sets maximum for Alcaraz because Djokovic, he's struggling. Now, at that point, if you were thinking that, you should have just stopped yourself and thought, okay, have we been here before? Because this has happened quite a few times with Djokovic, and he tends to be able to work his way through it very well. Very, very well. And that was the case in this match. So in the second set, he comes out and he knows that, okay, look, I can't move as efficiently as the first set. Now I've taken some painkillers or whatever, some treatment, and it's probably going to kick in at some point. But either way, I don't want to be pushing myself to the limits physically when I don't need to be anyway. So what he did was completely change tact in terms of game plan. And if I'm being honest, I think he should have done this from the start. And he did try to do this at Wimbledon and the 2024 final, but he didn't execute it well. And that was serving big, hitting his spots, and coming forward to the net when he could, finishing off points as quickly as possible, going big with the forehand, dictating with that side, and being aggressive from the get go, trying to be the one who is dictating and influencing the points as much as he can. And that's exactly what he ended up doing in the second set. And what's interesting is, and I'm going to fast forward to the post-match interview with Djokovic, and we'll go back to that second set. So post-match, Novak said if he had lost the second set, he wasn't sure if he would have continued playing. He saw Carlos was a bit hesitant from the back of the court in that second set onwards and took his opportunities, played more aggressively. It helped to have the injury because it helped him to be more aggressive. So he had more clarity in the second and third sets because of the injury. And it makes a lot of sense because when you have that type of injury, you know that, okay, well, it's not terrible that you can't play, but you are hampered a little bit, that you're limited in what you can and can't do. So he knew very clearly that I have to play a certain way. And so it meant that he was decisive in his game plan, in his movement, in the way that he approached the match from then on. So he started going huge with his serve. He didn't hold back on the first serve, went big, hit spots, and really went after that first serve. The forehand was massive in that second set, and well, second set onwards, it just started becoming. I mean, he was almost redlining. He was redlining on the forehand, and it was very reminiscent of that Olympic final. And we've seen it from Djokovic in the past anyway. I mean, he won the Australian Open in 2023, doing something very similar with the forehand. We know that he's gone through stages where the forehand has just become monstrous, and this is a last maybe 4 or 5 year thing. It hasn't been going on the whole of his career, but his forehand has become bigger and bigger and bigger when needed as he's gone older and older. And it's been perfect because it means in moments like this, when, okay, maybe it is an age thing, maybe it's just a niggle, that could happen to anyone. Either way, he has the tools at his disposal to adapt. And that's exactly what he did. And he's the most versatile player out there in a lot of ways, you could argue. So he manages to really start dictating in the points of the forehand. Carlos is being very hesitant from the back of the court, which is a massive shame. And actually, we can touch on what Carlos did because he essentially said this. He said, I saw that he had issues moving a little bit in the second set. I had to push him a little bit more just to the limit, and I didn't. After that, I think he started to feel better and played such a great level. That was my biggest mistake today. I think I had my chances. It was a really close match. I think most of the crucial points went his side. When Novak is playing at this level, it's really difficult to find a way to win. He also said, it's kind of like you're not playing at the same level. It seems like, okay, it's going to be easy. At the same time, in your mind, you're thinking like, okay, I have to not make mistakes. Probably you're not hitting the ball at the same way that you're hitting before, like at the same level. I'm assuming he's saying the same ball quality. Because I think that's it. I think he did great hits, great shots. He started to play more aggressively, tried not to move so much in the second set. He made a few errors, only a few errors, which made him stay in the set. A breakup will stay up. That's it. After that, as I said, it was really difficult to overcome that. So essentially, he is even able to identify Carlos that he was too cautious from the second set onwards. I think he went into this strange approach where he thought, okay, he's injured. I can just play solid and he's going to make errors or he's going to tire out and I'll win by essentially grinding him down. And I think he was worried he was going to miss, as he said. That's not a good place to be mentally. And he struggled, to be honest, because Djokovic went 3-love up, and then at that point, Alcaraz, he managed to get the break back eventually, but it wasn't a great approach, and he was struggling a lot of times on serve. I've always felt like he was the one who was more likely to get broken throughout the whole match. Watching, he also tended to go love 15 down a lot on his serve, and from the juice side, he struggled to win a lot of points in comparison to the ad side. So it just meant he was always chasing his tail, and not just in his own service games, but on the score as well. Because the third set was the first time I think that he had. Obviously he went 5-4 up in the first set and took it, but the third set was really the first time that he went up in a set at the start of it, or because he was serving first, managed to hold, but he was always chasing his tail from the start, in the first set, second set, and then had to recover, which is never ideal as well. What also changed a lot was the forehand. So we talked about the forehand being bigger for Novak in the second set. The errors were actually limited for Novak in the second set, despite him going for more. For Alcaraz, the errors started to flow. Now, not as much as the first set, but it was still a little bit telling. Now, this second set was interesting because if you look at the stats, you actually see potentially that, well, you won't see potentially, you will see that Alcaraz had the better of the stats. So if you look at it from a stats point of view, you'd say Alcaraz should have won the set. I would actually argue, I don't think he approached it in the right way, but he had his chances. He probably should have taken that second set. And if he takes that and he's clinical and he maybe takes it up a notch, like he said he should have, then as Novak said, he might have even retired and he would have ended up winning that set. And I think he would have if he'd taken that second set. That's just, I don't think Novak was coming from 2 sets to love down, in my opinion, anyway. One of the biggest changes, I think, in the second set, apart from the forehand, was the serve and return, especially the return. For Djokovic, he breaks at 5-4. Carlos Alcaraz, was hitting mid-box serves, not really hitting his spots at all, deep returning from Djokovic. And then to win the set, it was a vintage backhand return, off a second serve, down the line, clean as you like strike to win the set. If you want to talk about stats, second serve points won for Carlos Alcaraz at this point was at 33% for that set, 87% for Novak Djokovic. So he was really going after the Carlos Alcaraz second serve, and Alcaraz was not doing enough. And this was a pretty common theme throughout the match, and something that Alcaraz needs to look at because, generally speaking, he's a very good returner, but he was not doing enough on the second serve points, but especially on the second serve return. There are a lot of returns he missed where he shouldn't have. Djokovic was going predominantly out wide on the juice side to the Carlos Alcaraz forehand on second serve, and Alcaraz missed a lot of easy returns. And when I say easy, I'm saying easy for him. Like they're makeable returns. Getting a full swing, full racket on it. So that was interesting to see. Also interesting the fact that Novak was predominantly going into the forehand of Alcaraz, and Alcaraz seemed to be doing something quite similar at the start. He changed it up going to the backhand. I actually think that was a bad decision because the backhands were coming back with more interest, with more control, with better depth. It just seemed like he couldn't quite figure out what to do on his service games, and Novak just got stronger and stronger in the return games, made it more and more difficult, made Alcaraz play more and more and more balls, and it just ended up being very difficult for Carlos, sorry, even. But yeah, there's definitely a lack of first serve placement for Carlos in that second set, and the shot selection was definitely an issue. Then from then on, it was very similar in the third set as well. And then we get into the fourth set, and you're thinking, okay, well, Djokovic is taking over. He's clearly now feeling better. He's hitting the ball really clean. Alcaraz is struggling with the rhythm of the match. He's not really found his groove, and the level's not there at the moment. So what can you do in the fourth set? So fourth set, 2-1 break point for Carlos Alcaraz. And at 2-1, this is 2-1 to Novak Djokovic. He breaks early in the fourth set again. And you're thinking, okay, this could be done. So he's 2-1 down Alcaraz, and he has a break point at 30-40. And he goes passive. And when I say passive, I mean passive, like going down the middle of the court, not really doing much, not trying to change direction or take any risks. And Novak then ends up being the one who's brave, opens up, winner into out forehand. So that was interesting. What was also interesting is that Alcaraz, to me, he was up quite a few times, not just in the fourth set, but generally 40-15 up on his service games. And then he would have a couple of points where he'd switch off. He was struggling to really string points together on his service games consistently. So what ended up happening is in quite a few of the service games, he would be 40-15 up, and then he would make an error, or there'd be a double fault, or it would be a really good return from Novak, and it'd be juice. And he'd have to really fight for that service game. So then we're in the fourth set, and at 4-3, 15-40, Djokovic 4-3 up, 15-40 on his serve. So Alcaraz has got 2 break points to level things up, go 4-all. Really crucial point in this fourth set and in the match as well, because Alcaraz breaks back his 4-all. He's serving for 5-4. It's a big moment, right? Potentially takes a set, who knows? First break point, they get into the rally. So high intensity rally. First break point, forehand shank. Forehand shank from Alcaraz. And that to me was telling. And I know that anyone can shank, a forehand at any point, but I almost got this is no slight at Tsitsipas, but I did get Tsitsipas vibes from that forehand. It was almost like the pressure kind of got to him a little bit in that point. Second break point, serve and volley from Novak Djokovic on add up, and that was interesting to see. Yeah. So second break point, serve and volley. Novak, it was great serve out wide. Volley was really good as well. Clinical. Not much he can do on the second break point, so fair enough. We're at juice. Still in the game though, Carlos. Then Novak wins the next point, so we're at add up Novak, right? And you're thinking Carlos is going to really, he's going to throw everything at this advantage point. So the return from Carlos is a forehand up the middle. Novak goes forehand down the middle as well. Carlos hits, I'm not joking, it's a nothing slice. Nothing. And when I say nothing slice, it's like he's in two minds. I don't know what he does. He just almost just puts his racket out and just barely hits it, clips the net cord, and Novak then gets an easy forehand that he puts away into the open court. That was just so strange to see from Carlos. It was almost like he was reserved to losing at that point. And there'd been a lot of close calls where he had a lot of opportunities to get back into the set. It just wasn't happening. And as he said after as well, he knew that he had chances, but he just wasn't clinical. The biggest thing for me is that Novak was more clutch in the big moments. As simple as that. He was brave in the big moments. He wasn't cautious or passive. At break points down, he was playing aggressive tennis and trying to be the one on the front foot dictating. Alcaraz was not doing the same. And that to me was one of the biggest differences between the two players. Because if you look at the stats, there's not a lot in it. But as is always the case in elite level tennis, with the best players, it's always decided by a couple of points here or there, or decided on the pressure points. And at one point, I think it was in the fourth set, they showed the pressure point count, And for Novak, it was at 8, and for Carlos, it was at 2, and that really says it all. And what I think to me was not alarming but surprising was that, generally speaking, Carlos is extremely good in the pressure moments. He thrives in the pressure moments. That's when he really brings his best tennis. But that wasn't the case today. So I think he needs to look at himself and think, why was that the case? And this definitely can't become a common thing, because that to me is one of the biggest things that gives him the X factor. That's why he's won 4 slams, because when the going gets tough, he tends to be able to find something special. Today, that wasn't the case. And now he came up against an inspired opponent in Novak, no doubt. But this could, I'm not necessarily saying he would have won, but he could have been 2 sets love up pretty easily. The first set he won, Novak's hampered. Second set, he didn't approach it in the right way. He knows that. It could have gone very differently. But Novak played the match perfectly, with the injury, with the change of tactic, the way that he approached it from the mental standpoint, and strategically the way that he tweaked as well his game plan and adapted. I mean, he's the GOAT for a reason. Honestly, he's the GOAT for a reason. One thing I also wanted to say, which was extremely brave from Novak, was on the match point. It was second serve, 180 km/h second serve into the Carlos Alcaraz forehand. I mean, what do you want to say? It's just phenomenal, phenomenal performance from Novak to come back the way that he did with the injury as well. I mean, I think Alcaraz will be disappointed, but it's a learning experience for him. The only thing I wanted to point out, and we were talking about second serve, and Novak was so much better on the second serve points. And overall, I can go through all the stats, but I'm just going to go over second serve for now. 56% of second serve points won for Novak compared to 34% for Alcaraz. I mean, that's such a big, big point, of course, and a big factor. And it was a big factor in this. Total return points won 42% for Novak, 39% for Carlos. Total service points won 61% for Novak, 58% for Carlos. So he won that serve return dynamic. And that's a big, big factor. We know that. So, I mean, I think for Carlos, he needs to approach these types of matches a bit smarter, I think, and be clinical, because that's what really put Novak's, Rafa, and Rogers. That's what really differentiated them from the rest of the field. It wasn't just the skill; it was up here. It was the mindset. He's got to be clinical. If Novak's hampered, so destroy him in that moment, right? And I felt like the killer instinct wasn't there, so something to work on for him. But either way, Novak was just fighting till the end, as he always does. I hope he's fit and ready for the Alexander Zverev match. Guys, let me know in the comment section below what you thought of the match and my insights. Was there anything that I missed as well? Because there's a lot of nuance to it, of course. And Andy Murray, I'm sure he tactically would have had some sort of input into this match as well, which is really interesting to see. Obviously, a big, big, roar from Novak to Andy after as well. Andy very reserved, and just I thought it was really funny, his reaction, and they clearly seem like a great team. So long may that continue, because it's definitely an interesting partnership and one that seems to be fruitful so far anyway. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well. See you on the next video.